And so it was just weird. Like, she gave me a hug like I was her long lost sister. It was really interesting. It was really really fascinating. So I was excited to share that with you. I'm gonna post up a picture because we took a picture of each other. Well, we took a picture of us together, and it's just really interesting considering we're both complete strangers. The resemblance, by which I mean, you know, light skin, curly hair, glasses. But here he's calling. Hold on. Hi, you've reached London. Oh, 1 second. There you go. Hello?
Hello.
How are you? Is this Brian?
This is. How are you, London?
Oh, I'm awesome. I was just telling the whole world about my freak encounter with, like, my twin of the world, so it was really random. But how's your day going? How's everything with you?
Excellent, excellent. Can't complain.
Okay, good. So I was just telling them pretty much how you got in touch with me through Facebook, which is an awesome way to connect and to reach out to people. And I was wondering if you wanted to kind of give yourself an introduction, because you probably know a little bit more about yourself than I would know about you.
Probably, I would think so. Well, my name's Brian Niskala. I am from Denellen, New Jersey, which is in the United States. I know you broadcast all over the world.
Yep.
And basically born and raised in this little square mile town, and just kind of went from there. I grew up around a bunch of friends that were fantastic artists, and you know, I was challenged trying to draw stick people, so I had to find another way to kind of like express myself in an outlet. That was pretty much how I got into like writing and short stories and onto novels.
And so this novel here, okay, you have to help me with the pronunciation. Is it Rhinehoth?
Rhinehoth. Yeah.
Rhinehoth. Okay. And is this your first novel that you've completed?
This is the first one I've completed. I actually have about 20 other titles in the works, 2 of which I'm very close to finishing as well. So this is the first one that basically from start to finish to the editing to print and, you know, now published on Amazon. So.
Oh, that's amazing. So why don't you go ahead and give us pretty much the run-through of what the story is about. I heard it's horror, and I was telling everyone that I'm terrified of horror. Like, I get too emotionally invested into the stories, and I just freak myself out. So how did you come about writing horror, and where did you get where's the concepts from?
Well, actually, I came up with writing. Actually, I tried to be more of a sci-fi author rather than anything else. But then watching horror movies, and you know, I grew up with like the Friday the 13th movies and stuff, and I found it not like intellectually stimulating for like the average moviegoer. I mean, if you just want to go for like some mindless blood and horror, that's great. But I think that you should have a little bit more of a storyline, with a little bit more science involved and history involved in the horror. So you know, I grew up reading Stephen King and you know Dean Koontz and all those guys. And a lot of them kind of annoyed me to a certain extent, and I think that's probably from my like sci-fi background. So I want stuff to be like to an extent credible, so you can kind of relate a little bit more with the characters. You know, and the horror aspect is just stuff that I mean you feel relatively safe in your everyday life. And horror kind of gives you that outlet, you know, that you know fight or flight instinct kind of kicks in when you're watching horror. And in our daily lives, we really don't get involved in, you know, anything that's really horrifying. So obviously, horror was a good outlet. And I took my sci-fi, being a fan of sci-fi, and brought it into horror. And so what I did with this story is that I basically have the main character. His name is Simon Roberts, and he's from England. And he ends up traveling to Germany because he keeps trying to basically outrun the police in England. So when he gets to Germany, he gets involved in a jewelry heist that goes terribly wrong. You know, everybody ends up dying except him. He ends up surviving, goes to court, and he finds himself being convicted of all these murders. Now, he ends up going to a fictional place I designed. It's a Rhinehoth Castle, which was a castle from about the 1400s, which I tried to make a very historically accurate and put into a black forest in Germany, near the Rhine River, thus Rhinehoth, and just kind of shows how he survives in this setting. But in the Black Forest, it has always had a legendary aspect of, you know, of vampires and werewolves. So I figured, what better setting to put this guy in He's like an average day person, just kind of like, you know, me and you, just trying to get through life. And he ends up in this horrible prison where the prison guards are actually werewolves, and the whole prison is basically designed and built to imprison this one vampire prince back from like the 1400s, who obviously has been surviving all these years to modern day where the story takes place. He just goes through his whole cycle of going through the court system, going into his castle, being in prison, and he finds out that he's this ancient warrior back from the same time period that the vampire prince was in prison. I don't want to give too much of the story away, but it's basically him trying to survive these nightmares that he's been having. And there's a doctor, a female doctor in a prison, who he kind of gets romantically involved with. Obviously that's no, but, you know, it just makes a good story. And then it just kind of goes on from there. You know, you have to obviously buy the book and read it to see how he survives, if he survives.
No, I understand. And I was looking on the preview, or I guess the promotional video that you did on YouTube, and I kind of get the vibe that it's more of like a mystical horror. Is that accurate to say?
Well, I designed it to be a dark Gothic horror, which traditionally you don't see too much. If you've seen the Underworld movies,
yeah,
that could be related to as kind of like a Gothic horror, where you have like you know, like these big castle settings, very dark, you know, wardrobes and costumes that you know, the actors wear in the story. So I was trying to duplicate that dark feel. Instead of something like I've watched Twilight. I'm a fan of Stephanie Meyer, but her stories are kind of that mystical, far-fetched fantasy things. You know, like for, you know, a vampire to walk out in the daylight and all of a sudden he starts glistening as these little diamond rhinestones on it. You know, to me that's almost insulting to the viewing audience, because when you look at that grasp of reality, you really want to see something like that. You know, not to say that vampires or werewolves are very credible characters, but when you go to that far extent, I didn't like that, so I wanted to make something a little more darker, a little more, I guess, not adult as far as like, you know, adult film or anything, but just something that is credible, that's dark, that's dismal, that if you were in that setting, you'd be just scared to death.
So I find with the Twilight, the reason why, I mean, I find that it was very watered down so that it can meet a very vast audience. I mean, I'm no longer preteen, but I was just enthralled in that whole movie. But I mean, a lot of preteens are really interested in it, so I understand why it was watered down. So what would you say the genre or the rating for your book would be, and like what age group are you targeting?
Oh, I was targeting like obviously the mid-20-something till, I mean, you could be up to 60 years old. I've had people read it and have enjoyed it. And, you know, I wasn't shooting for a teenage crowd. That wasn't my target audience, so I was looking for the more mature crowd. Like I said, I do have a romance plot in the story, in the novel, so it gives you something to follow, kind of like Twilight does. Like you have the, you know, the vampires versus the werewolves, and you have that whole romantic quality of it. I do have that in my story as well, but I just have it more of a sci-fi horror, Gothic horror feel to it. So obviously I have a much older audience that I'm shooting for.
And the title Rhinehoth is a very unique one. What's the meaning behind that, or how did you come up with that?